good evening, this is Hound Dog Steve wishing you a very pleasant evening, and here we are, the day after the UK elections, and of course Boris Johnson and his Conservatives have had a sweeping win across the UK. Conservatives 365 seats and Labour 203. So this is a commanding lead that the Conservatives have achieved, and when you look at the map of the UK, it is virtually entirely blue. There are pockets or islands of red for the Labour, and of course the Scotland went basically all yellow with the SNP, so that will be an interesting situation up there. They may have another referendum to leave the UK and stay within the EU. But this is Jeremy Corbyn's second referendum. You wanted another referendum? You wanted to know how the British people felt about Brexit? Well, now you know. And it's very interesting that the stock market and the pound have surged after the Conservative win. And, you know, this shows you that it's not just because the Conservatives have won the election. It's because the question mark has been lifted, the uncertainty has been lifted, and Boris Johnson has promised to fulfil the Brexit promise by the end of January. And to be quite honest with you, I am hoping against hope that he pulls out without a deal and let them negotiate from outside of the EU. I think you'll be in a much stronger position. You'll be able to make a much stronger case for British goods and British imports, and you know, you won't feel so beholden. You don't want England to become an associate of Europe in any way, shape or form. It needs to be completely independent. And so this is a vote for the Brexit. This is a vote for democracy as well as the Conservative government. So I think you're going to see things are going to go quite well. And even George Soros has come out and said that the whole globalist movement, the New World Order, is collapsing. Now, I will, there's just a little addendum to this. I will link below the latest James Corbett video, and he fleshes out that the whole globalism, New World Order issue, and of course, as we should have guessed, you know, New World Order 101 will be replaced by New World Order 201. So yeah, it's a very interesting little documentary that James has done, of course very factual. I really do like James Corbett. I'm going to give him a big plug here because he is probably one of the best researchers that I have come across. I've been listening to James for years, and he has never let me down. He's always been independent and impartial, and he makes out a good case for how, you know, whenever one idea of globalism or New World Order fails, which has been spoken about for decades now. This is not a recent phenomenon, and each one is superseded by the newer and improved version of the New World Order. Now, I don't know whether I've told you, but personally I believe in the New World Community. And this is essentially what James is talking about as well. It's a spontaneous humanity, a spontaneous planet. And he gives a very good example of, you know, we don't need a body to govern English to communicate with each other. We just use it. We don't need anyone to control that, or we create our own language spontaneously to cover the kind of negotiations that we need to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And we will always do that. And so if we have the New World Community, you'll find that groupings will get together, but it'll be a lot more organic. Things will pop up to suit the needs and times, and we will, I think, probably engage in a much more fruitful and sustainable fashion with this planet that we live on. Anyway, let's pop over and see these articles that I've picked out, and I'll come back and do a very quick wrap-up. Okie dokie, here we go. USA Today. Boris Johnson's Conservative Party wins majority in UK Parliament, clearing path for Brexit. London. Britain's Conservative Party and Prime Minister Boris Johnson secured a majority in Parliament on Friday, winning an election that pitted Johnson's plan to get Brexit done against opposition parties who wanted to delay Britain's departure from the European Union or even cancel it altogether. The victory makes Johnson the most electorally successful Conservative leader since Margret Thatcher, and is a disaster for left-wing Labour leader Corbyn, who is already facing calls for his resignation. The result likely paves the way for Johnson to push through Brexit on January 31st after 3 years of divisive and acrimonious debate by lawmakers over whether Britain should leave a bloc it joined more than 4 decades ago. From The Guardian, UK election results 2019, Boris Johnson returned as PM with all constituencies declared. And here we have 365, that's plus 66 seats, Labour 203, minus 42, the SNP, that's the Scottish Nationalist Party, plus 13, 48, the Lib Dems, minus 10, down to 11. Boris Johnson's Conservative Party has secured a majority by seizing the seats from Labour Party in its traditional heartlands in the North and Midlands. Johnson remains Prime Minister and should now be able to get his Brexit deal through Parliament. After a disastrous night, Jeremy Corbyn said he will not lead the Labour Party into the next election. Meanwhile, Lib Dem leader Joe Swinson and DUP Westminster leader Nigel Dodds have lost their seats. And this from Market Watch, British stocks surge after Johnson's Conservative win majority. Home builders and banks in the UK rallied on Friday in relief at a commanding Conservative victory in the general election. Equity strategists at Citi said UK election results is probably as good as it gets. While Conservatives had led in the polls since the election was called, it wasn't clear beforehand that they would win a majority in Parliament. And there we go. That is what business wants, is certainty, not uncertainty. And here we are from Russia Today. Scuffles with police in central London as outraged anti-Brexit protesters march on 10 Downing Street. Not content with the victorious Conservative leader's suggestion that it was time to let the healing begin, an angry crowd of anti-Brexit protesters has taken to London streets chanting, "Boris Johnson, not our Prime Minister." The Johnson's Conservatives scored a decisive win in Thursday's general election, winning an 80-seat majority in Parliament on the back of the PM's promise to get Brexit done. However, droves of protesters turned out on Friday evening to dispute Johnson's victory. Holding aloft signs saying "Defy Tory rule" and "Stop Islamophobia," several hundred protesters assembled outside Johnson's residence at Downing Street before marching to Trafalgar Square and onwards with no clear end in sight. And there's no irony intended there, but there is no clear end in sight. The protest drew a heavy police presence, and groups of protesters, some wearing face masks, periodically scuffled with the officers. As the march went on, crowds of protesters bearing the black and red flag of Antifa clashed with police, knocking officers to the ground and chanting "scum." But there you go, Antifa again. And this is really what Corbyn represents. This is the rabble that Corbyn represents. And here we have George Soros in despair. George Soros says he is alarmed and frustrated at the speed in which US President Trump is dismantling the New World Order. Speaking exclusively to the Washington Post, the billionaire globalist who champions liberal causes admits he regrets not foreseeing Trump's meteoric rise to power. Fearful that Trump is willing to destroy the world, Soros has vowed to redouble his efforts in pouring billions of dollars into opposing everything Trump stands for. While the Hungarian-American Jew might appear full of doom and gloom in his interview, it is said that his fears are not unfounded. Within the constraints of the deep state and other influences, Trump presided over much taking apart of the liberal globalist world order that Soros has worked for decades to build. In doing so, he has destroyed the old example of transatlantic relations in a simple spree of tweets. And this story is from September the 9th this year. I can't imagine. I mean, he looks pretty sour right there, but I can't imagine what his face looks like today after Boris Johnson has won the election. And this is what the map of England looks like politically now. Look at the blue. Look at the blue. And as you see, there are just small islands of red here and there for the Labour, and of course all yellow in Scotland for the SNP. But yes, Tory blue has painted England last night. Now, as I said, I think that you will see that this is the beginning of the end of Europe, of the EU. We're already seeing riots in France and Germany in a video I did previously. This is just going to continue as the conditions, as the cost of living rises, as the farmers find it more and more tenuous to farm and food costs rise, you're going to see more and more unrest, because these are things that are out of control of the globalist leaders, and because they live in a bubble, of course they don't think of these sort of things. They don't, it doesn't occur to them that there may be these kind of issues at a lower level, because really we don't matter. And that's the problem with this situation. They are playing a game. It's kind of interesting, because I see in my business as I talk to people, the Brexit question is a very wonderful example, because that was a legitimate vote. It was binding, it was agreed on by everybody, and yet when the Remainers lost the vote, they couldn't let it go. And so for the elitists, the globalists, they couldn't see the unfairness of that, and they kept pushing that and driving the Remainers to act. And of course you'll see one of the articles, of course, was there are protesters already who can't take the result of the election, just like in the States, three years of agony because they couldn't accept the result of a fair election. Like it or not, like Trump or not, it was a fair election. But you see, at our level, even at kindergarten, our entire lives we are taught about fair play, a sense of fairness, this kind of thing, and so we inherently know that to not abide by a binding referendum or election is not fair play. And I think that is why the Conservatives won the seats that they did, not only to punish the Labour, but to take back charge of their own country. I think people are realising that we are losing, or we have been losing, control of our own countries in, I don't think we've ever had control of it over our countries, let's put it that way, but there was certainly more contact, more outreach towards the general public, and the government and systems that we have. They certainly seem to be run quite a bit more fairly than they are right now. We workers are in a terrible predicament. And of course, the other thing is the Conservative has become the new Labour. Okay, Boris Johnson is not an extremist. Please don't misunderstand who this man is. He is a right-of-centre Conservative. And the Labour government, the Liberal government, used to be just left of centre. And the Liberals have gone, the Labour have gone to the extreme left. Sure, it looks like Boris Johnson is to the extreme right, but he's not. He's a centrist. I think you will be quite surprised at the even-handedness in which he governs the country. But how this all turns out, as I said in my previous video, talk is cheap, and it will be actions that we are watching for. So keep your eye open. I will be following this story, and certainly I am waiting to see what kind of Brexit situation we come out with. Okay, if you've enjoyed this video, please like, comment and subscribe below, and in the meantime, this is Hound Dog Steve signing off, wishing you a very pleasant evening. See you now. Take care. Bye.